The soaring dark curtain descended upon Dowd. His skill, Soul Linker, activated, siphoning magic power from an unseen source. He triggered Penance, followed by Guardian Shield, but the defenses shattered instantly under the overwhelming force. The attack struck his chest, sending him flying. Each impact against the ground cracked the earth like a spider web, his body bouncing uncontrollably until momentum finally faded with a heavy thud. The earth splintered beneath him as he coughed violently. The manhwa did not include gruesome images, but these were their conditions. Consciousness returned with agony. Every nerve screamed as if his body had been shredded and hastily stitched back together. His mouth opened in a silent scream. His brain burned like live wires had been jammed into his skull, his muscles convulsing beyond control, along with coagulated blood. When his vision cleared, he wished it hadn't. His left arm was pulp. Shards of stone and glass were embedded in his torso, and his legs bent at impossible angles. That he still lived defied all logic. He tried to rise, but his vision flooded red, his body trembling violently. With his remaining arm, he dragged himself toward the faint glow of divine Ultima. That last-second shield was the only thing that had prevented his vaporization. The demonic energy's weakness to divinity had barely saved him. Laughter echoed around him. The Academy stood hundreds of meters away, proof of how far Riverback's attack had launched them. Marquis Riverback approached, his demon-corrupted form radiating malice. That aristocratic smirk remained intact beneath the pulsing veins. He taunted Dowd, asking if he had really survived that, then remarked that he seemed out of tricks, suggesting they make it quick. Elnor finally caught up, staggering to Dowd's side. Her injuries were nearly as severe as his. Broken ribs, compound fractures, and her dress torn into makeshift bandages. Yet she focused only on him. Elnor was about to say something but stopped. She only looked at him and kept her mouth shut, her expression that of sorrow. Seeing her distressed, Dowd lied through bloody teeth, claiming it wasn't as bad as it looked. Silently, she removed her necklace and threw it to him. The moment he caught it, he felt its power. His stamina and durability surged. Dowd stared at her. Elnor continued, her voice steady despite her injuries, saying, Riverback wouldn't kill her immediately. She was part of his plans. She'd buy Dowd time. All this time I've only taken from him, she thought. Now, it's my turn to pay him back. When Dowd still hesitated, she smiled, the same shy smile she'd given him when they held hands at the festival. Isn't it just right to give back what we received? Riverback, arms folded, watched them with amusement, his stance radiating inevitable victory. Elnor faced him, shattered but unbroken. Her sword crackled with energy as she asked him one question: how convincing were they as a couple? A question to buy little time. Riverback, momentarily confused, burst into laughter. He called them a match made in hell. Well, he is a demon worshipper, adding that they should breed if they survived. Elnor accepted the answer with a cold remark. Mercy, it is. Her eyes turned black. She lunged at him, the ground fracturing beneath the force of her movement. She kicked him in the face, and then her sword became a blur, slashing him countless times before she unleashed Maxima Tramontana. The attack slammed Riverback into the ground with a thunderous impact, fissures spreading in all directions, but Riverback didn't care. His wounds healed instantly. He glanced at Dowd's previous location, noting his absence with a sneer. He already scurried away like a rat, he muttered before launching himself toward the academy, following the blood trail. Elnor, seeing Riverback pursue Dowd, immediately gave chase. As Riverback flew through the air, his voice boomed. What more do you have hidden up your sleeve? Elijah's disbelieving words hung in the stunned silence. Around them, dozens of man-eaters twitched helplessly on the bloodied cobblestones, their monstrous forms reduced to writhing heaps. She let out a disbelieving chuckle, resting her sword against her shoulder. Everyone had thought the plan was madness when Talion first proposed it. Even Elijah, had she not known Dowd Campbell devised it, would have dismissed it outright. The standard protocol was clear. Summon the knights, evacuate civilians, and contain the threat through overwhelming numbers. Yet Dowd's strategy defied all convention. A handful of professors, a few knights, and some students against hundreds of man-eaters? It sounded like a death sentence. These creatures, though diminished in intellect, remained brutally efficient killers. Conventional wisdom demanded 3-to-1 odds just to survive an engagement. And yet, Elijah surveyed the battlefield. Not a single civilian casualty. The monsters lay defeated by fewer than 20 defenders, all because one man had foreseen what no one else considered: the bloodshed that would occur during evacuation. Dean Conrad. Baltador's voice snapped her from her thoughts. The towering knight clapped a gauntleted hand on her shoulder, his armor streaked with blackened monster blood. Behind him, President Atalante surveyed the scene with quiet satisfaction. Elijah admitted they had been lucky Conrad and the president were present, acknowledging that the plan wouldn't have succeeded without them. Conrad interrupted, insisting that every single person there had been crucial, that missing one component would have collapsed the entire operation. Elijah frowned, questioning why the dean and president had been nearby in the first place. Conrad's lips quirked as he mentioned dinner reservations, how Atalante had insisted on that particular restaurant weeks ago. Quite the coincidence, no? Her gaze drifted to Evan Kramer, the monster research student Dowd had specifically requested. The same student who'd facilitated her mock battle with Dowd during orientation. The department's sole expert on man-eater physiology, who just happened to be at the festival because a benefactor had invited him. Conrad continued casually, mentioning that the monster research department had been slated for closure that year, until he witnessed that orientation battle and saw their potential. Another fortunate accident. Elijah's breath caught as the pieces aligned. The nights Dowd had preemptively requested through the president. The Purification House students immune to monster transformation. Every seemingly random element positioned with terrifying precision. How long has he been preparing for this? She whispered. Conrad's laughter boomed across the square. Perhaps it's all a genuine coincidence. Elijah pressed the question that lingered beneath it all. Then where's Talion? Every movement sent waves of agony through Dowd's body. Each breath felt like hot iron rods stabbing his lungs. His vision flickered dangerously as he crawled forward when walking became impossible. The academy gates loomed ahead, strangely deserted, with no guards in sight. As he dragged himself forward, Dowd spotted a golden cylinder about the length of a human arm lying on the ground. The object appeared featureless. Through the pain, he realized Talion must have left it there for him. Just bending down to retrieve it sent fresh spasms of pain through his battered body. But he forced himself to focus. He had to hold on a little longer for Elnor's sake. A thunderous crash interrupted his thoughts as Elnor's broken form impacted the ground beside him. Her face was barely recognizable through the injuries. Riverback's voice dripped with contempt as he compared them to stubborn roaches that kept crawling even when crushed. Elnor managed to meet Dowd's eyes, her gaze filled with apology and despair. Riverback gathered black energy in his palm while Elnor twitched helplessly on the ground. Then came the devastating impact. The beam tore through Dowd's chest, bringing with it encroaching darkness. The shock in Elnor's eyes at that moment seemed to surpass all her previous suffering. Just as Riverback pronounced his final verdict, the world suddenly turned gray. Some mysterious power had activated. Fatal charm. Corrupted text flooded Dowd's vision as he realized with startling clarity that time had literally stopped. Despite the gaping hole in his chest, his consciousness remained perfectly clear while everything around him froze in place. Riverback's twisted expression, the blood spraying from the wound, even the very air itself became immobile. In this gray-stained world, only one thing moved. A figure descended gracefully into Dowd's field of vision, floating down with complete disregard for gravity or physics. She possessed flowing white hair, 2 demonic horns, and eyes redder than fresh blood. Her flawless white skin showed no blemishes, and she wore an elegant red dress. There was something vaguely familiar about her features. If one imagined Elnor aged several years, they might see a resemblance. But this couldn't possibly be Elnor or any human being. The overwhelming aura of evil radiating from her made that abundantly clear. This could only be one entity, the Grey Devil. Extra knowledge, the Soul Linker, an epic tier amulet wrapped around Dowd's wrist, was one of fewer than 20 such artifacts in the world, crafted personally by the president after a full day's labor. Imbued with a slumbering great spirit, it retained 100% magic charge, though the current synchronization rate was 0.01% after Dowd sacrificed the incense burner. Unlike other classes which required rare materials to increase synchronization, Dowd's priest abilities allowed him to raise it naturally through divinity-based skills. Once fully awakened, projected to be at Chapter 2, the Soul Linker would provide magic power reserves, allowing Dowd to use skills despite having no innate magic.